Hello everyone, I'm Brock, the Curly Man behind Curly Man's Comics, and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 favorite comic book artists. I want to ask you guys to like, subscribe, and comment. And before I get too much into this video, if you watched my last video, I mentioned that I just graduated with a comic art degree. So I'm going to be semi-biased on the art that's influenced my art style, the art that I like, the stories that I really like. So I just want you to keep that in mind as I'm going through my top 10 favorite artists. But without further ado, let's get into number 10. Alright, so at number 10 I have Jeff Lemire. And if you've watched my past YouTube videos, you know that I'm a huge fan of him, so I do have a little bias towards him. But I'm leaving him at number 10 because he does have a rougher art style that's not going to be as attractive to a lot of people. His art is really there to just help get the story across. All of his stories usually have a deep emotional log going through them. So his art is really just there as a minimum thing to help you see and visualize what is going along with the story. There's nothing fancy, so his books are really easy to read, fast reads, which I really enjoy, and that's why I'm placing him at number 10. Alright, so at number 9 I have Ryan Ottley. And I would say he's best known for his work on Invincible, but he's also currently working on Spider-Man. And his work is just very easy to read. It has nice angular lines. All of the characters are very distinct and easy to look at. His poses are very interesting and in-depth. Probably my favorite thing about him is how colorists work with him. I really enjoy when they just put in flat colors. I think it makes his artwork look the best. But in later issues of Invincible, I know for sure, they started to get more in-depth with the shading. It still looked interesting, it just wasn't as much fitting with what I appreciated about his artwork. I also want to mention, his gore is out of this world. By far the best gore artist I've ever seen. Some of the scenes in Invincible I'll put up here, but the gore was amazing. If it's something that you're not interested in looking at, I definitely wouldn't check out Invincible, but he's a great artist, very well-rounded artist all around, so I would definitely check him out if you haven't yet. At number 8 I have Geoff Darrow, and I know him best from his work on Hard Boiled, which is essentially a story about a guy that just likes to shoot up a lot of things, drive a lot of fast cars if I remember right. But I really didn't care as much about the story. It was more the artwork in the story was just amazing. I don't know how long it would take him to do a page. I'll leave some of his work up next to me. But he pays attention to every single fine detail. If there's a car crash, he'll draw every single little tiny part that would be flying off the car. It's amazing to look at. I'm not typically drawn to this kind of art. I'm typically more drawn to like expressive, in your face, not all that much going on work. But this stuff is amazing to look at. So I definitely recommend you check out Geoff Darrow's work. At number 7 we have Kagan McLeod, and my favorite work from him is Infinite Kung Fu, and it's this story about all of these Kung Fu experts that have different sort of powers. One of the guys can make his arms and limbs detach from his body and then he can send him off to fight people. It's a really fun, interesting read, but what I really love about this book is his solid blacks, his solid whites, and the gray tones in the middle. He does it with a really smooth, flowing sense, and everything just seems to look right. None of his characters are rigid or stiff, they're all very abstract in a way, and it's a really interesting read. I definitely check it out. And if you don't like his work, he's also working on Cobra Kai, which is a newer series about more Kung Fu kind of fighting, so check out Kagan McLeod. At number 6 we have Dustin Nguyen, and I personally know his work from Ascender and Descender, which is a story about these space children robots that basically gain powers and are fighting other alien breeds. Very interesting story. It's still ongoing if you're interested in checking it out. But I'm a watercolor artist at heart, so I kind of have a bias for watercolor artists. And his watercolor is amazing. How he can pack so much color into a scene. He has very little line work, but everything still seems to work very well. I met him at a convention, super nice guy. I have a Jeff Lemire Sweet Tooth comic tattooed on my arm, and he had some Sweet Tooth drawings that he made. And he's like, oh, cool tattoo. He sent it to Jeff Lemire. Jeff Lemire posted it on Instagram. One of my best stories I've ever had with comic books. So great guy, great comics. Check out Dustin Nguyen's art. At number 5, I have Tony Moore. And I have a bias with Tony Moore because I have a bias with Walking Dead. I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, and specifically his art got me into comics. He has a weird combination of sort of a cartoon style with also realism. You can definitely see it in his characters' eyes and their expressions. He uses black, white, and grays very well and doesn't have any color in The Walking Dead. Really awesome guy also. I have a tattoo of his work also. The person that tattooed me knew him from a convention that he met him at. Said he was a great guy. He posted my tattoo on Instagram and Tony Moore liked it. Another huge story about my tattoos that I love. I'll have to do a video about my tattoos someday. But really great guy, really amazing art. Check out Tony Moore. At number 4, I have Ryan Stegman, and I specifically know him from his latest work on Venom. And the way he draws Venom is very interesting. He has a lot of hatching, a lot of cross-hatching, just a lot of line work. He kind of has that similar style to Tony Moore where it's a combination of realism and a cartoon. I would say he favors a little more towards realism. His characters seem very lively, very fluid in a way. I met him at C2E2 and he's a very nice guy. You can tell he's very dedicated to his work. He mentioned during the panel that he takes around a full day to draw just one comic book page, and he only does the pencil work. So you can see how much dedication he's putting into every single page. He really loves his form, so definitely check out Ryan Stegman. At number 3, I have Wes Craig. And Wes Craig, I would say, is most well known for his work on Deadly Class, which is a story about this homeless child that gets brought to this school for assassins, and he has a plan to kill the future president. He does a lot of drugs, a lot of stuff that's not really age appropriate, but it's a great story. But the artwork in the story is amazing. It has really flat colors, so I'm giving some credit to the colorist as well. The artwork just works really well. It works well with the flat colors, everything's very easy to read. There's not all that much background detail, so it's really character orientated, which works well for the story. On top of that, he makes the most unique page layouts I've ever seen. He uses circle panels, his panels seem to flow and cut, they're collaged together. It's very interesting, and I think it's one of the things that I love the most about him is how unique he is with his page layouts. So if you haven't checked out Wesley Craig art, I would definitely check it out. At number 2, I have Ralph Meyer, and he's an artist that a lot of people won't know about because he's foreign. But since he's foreign, his artwork looks very different than American comics. He uses a lot of black hatching, and he pays a lot of attention to his backgrounds, which is very interesting. Everything has just the right amount of detail. His night scenes look very interesting. Everything is very readable. His most well-known story, in my opinion, is Undertaker, which follows an Undertaker on his journeys across this country. In one of the stories, a very rich person ate all of his gold before he died. So the Undertaker is trying to take the person to where he wanted to be buried, but everyone else is trying to attack the Undertaker because they want to cut this person open and take all the gold out of him. It's a very interesting story. It looks very well with his artwork. It's almost like watching a cartoon put inside of a book. So it's a very unique experience, and I would definitely check out Ralph Mayer's stories. At number 1, I have Tyler Jenkins, and I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, and I have a lot of biases on why I like this artist. For one, he's done one of my favorite comics, Grass Kings. On top of that, I find his watercolors to be very beautiful and interesting to look at. But I think most importantly, it has a kind of nostalgia and homey feel to me. I feel very comfortable reading his books. They remind me of children's books that I used to read when I was younger, but the stories in these are a lot more adult, a lot more in-depth look on what it is to be human. He's done another work called King of Nowhere, which just started up. And in this story, he's getting even crazier with his watercolors. The colors are much more vibrant. His panel layouts are really weird. The story is really weird. So if you don't like Grass Kings, I would definitely check out King of Nowhere. He's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I want you to give him a chance because his art works very well for the stories that he's creating. And those are my top 10 favorite comic book artists. In my last video, I mentioned my comic book horror stories, and I asked you guys to leave a comment on what your comic book horror stories were. And I got one from J.2 that I want to read off. And he had multiple different situations that arose. One of them was he was feeling sick and lost his balance and fell on one of his short boxes of comics. In another situation, people robbed his house, and as they were robbing his house, stepped on some of his comics, including a Batman 635 newsstand. And finally, he lost 2 copies of his Simpsons comic books as he was moving. Luckily, he had 2 extra copies. And those sound way worse than my stories. I feel bad for you. Hopefully you're having some comic book karma. Things are turning around. Maybe someone's reverse robbing your house and bringing you new comics? Probably not, but I hope things are turning out better for you. In this video, I would love for everyone to drop a comment on what their favorite comic book artist is and maybe why they're their favorite comic book artist. If you want to go back to my last video and mention one of your comic horror stories, I would love to read off more of those in my future videos, but as always, I'm dying. Sorry about that. Something caught my throat. As always, I'm Brock, the curly man behind Curly Man's Comics, signing off.